Kamui Kobayashi will join 2311 Racing once again at Circuit of the Americas, and Kyle Larson joins the many drivers calling for more horsepower on the next-gen car. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got 10 NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Nosbar's 2024 Gamebridge Cal Ripken's Jr. scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. This scheme looks pretty solid in my opinion. I like the white around it. I love also they're doing the Cal Ripken Jr. Foundation. I think it looks really solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Bristol. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sammy Smith's 2024 Pilot Flying J Coffee scheme that we'll see in a couple races in 2024. This paint scheme looks really solid in my opinion. I like the brown. I like everything about it. I've always been a big fan of Pilot Flying J schemes. This one looks pretty good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Majeski's 2024 Soda Sense scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Bristol. This paint scheme's decent in my opinion, nothing really special about it. Thor Sport schemes can either be really good or they can be a little bit boring. This one's decent. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Bristol. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ben Rhodes' 2024 T-Sports scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Bristol. I like this one a lot more than the Soda Sense scheme. I think it does look pretty solid. We'll see what Ben Rhodes can do with the scheme. I love the T-Sports back working with the team this season. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2024 Costa Oil scheme that we'll see in a couple races in 2024. Seems like Costa Oil is known for following everybody on X, but they do have a solid paint scheme here, and we'll see if Ryan Ellis can have a good run. He's had a solid start to the season. I think he's in the top 20 in points, so we'll see if Ryan Ellis can have a good run with this scheme in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Bristol purse money for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for that event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $8,182,531. And for the Truck Series race, as known as Xfinity Series race this weekend, it's $761,274. Not a lot of good purse money for the Truck Series. Basically, like the small teams really aren't going to be getting much. And for the Cup Series, it's a little more money considering it is going to all the charter teams, which of course are the only teams showing up this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. It's some decent purse money for the Cup Series, but for the Xfinity, for the Truck Series especially, it's not some really good purse money. Hopefully when we get the new TV deal, more purse money can come into play for even the Cup Series and even the Truck and the Xfinity Series as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Charlotte Xfinity Series race. As their title sponsor has been revealed, it is going to be called the BetMGM 300. They're changing, I think, from the Alsco Uniforms 300 or the Alsco 300 and changing it to BetMGM, obviously with it being announced this week that they're opening up the pocketbook for betting and gambling in North Carolina. That's why BetMGM is coming on to play. They also got a big partnership with Austin Dillon and Kyle Busch and RCR in the Xfinity Series as well, in the Cup Series, I should say. So it's pretty cool to see that is going to be a title sponsor. Glad to see that BetMGM is joining on and sponsoring the Xfinity Series race at Charlotte. Pretty exciting and good stuff overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Callum Iot. As it was announced yesterday late morning that Callum Iot is going to drive the 6 for Aaron McLaren once again at the Thermal Club. Remember, this car is supposed to be driven for David Malukas, but he did miss St. Petersburg because, unfortunately, he had an injury that he suffered after a bike riding accident. And I think he revealed this about a week or two ago that he more than likely was not going to be racing at the Thermal Club next weekend. But now we have confirmation that Callum Iot is going to be back behind the wheel. Callum Iot made his return to IndyCar last weekend at St. Petersburg and honestly did a really solid and really good job. Ran top 15 a lot of the day, and I think he ended up getting a top 15 finish as well. For a driver basically had zero testing going into this season and basically was almost the first time he'd been behind the wheel, he did a pretty good job. Obviously with the Thermal Club and the format being announced, things are going to be a little different. I think Callum Iot is a driver that's really good, and depending on what happens during this year, if he continues to impress and gets to run all the IndyCar races, I think he'll continue to do good things with the team. Also wishing the best of luck with David Malukas, and hopefully he'll get back on the racetrack soon. But glad to see that Callum Iot is getting a chance and opportunity to drive at the Thermal Club next weekend or in a few weeks down the road. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NBM Motorsports. As it was announced yesterday late afternoon or late morning that NBM Motorsports is going to be returning to the Cup Series for the first time since 2022 at Circuit of the Americas. And the driver that's going to be driving for the team is Timmy Hill. We'll get to Timmy Hill in just a second, but our original plans were for Matt Jaskol to drive this car at Circuit of the Americas. However, the reason Matt Jaskol is not getting behind the wheel of the number 66 car is because of the fact that Matt Jaskol did not have the sponsorship or funding. He did secure some funding, but it was not enough for him to get a Cup Series ride with NBM Motorsports. But now we get to the driver's drive behind the wheel, Timmy Hill. Timmy Hill, I think, has the most starts for NBM Motorsports. I'm not really shocked or surprised to see that they are actually back in the NASCAR Cup Series with Timmy Hill. But for NBM Motorsports, I know they were trying to get some starts in 2023 done, and it sounds like they're planning to run around 10 to maybe even 15 starts for 2024, which is really, really exciting because the more experience you can get on the racetrack, the better you can be. And Timmy Hill, in my opinion, is one of the more underrated drivers in NASCAR today. So I think this is an amazing and fantastic opportunity for Timmy Hill, and I'm glad to see that he is going to be running at Circuit of the Americas next weekend. And we're expecting to have around 3 open entries for the event. We do know that 2311 Racing, they're going to be running a third car for Kamui Kobayashi. We'll get to later in this episode, but now you start speculating other drivers. We'll talk about that in just a second. But at the same token, same time, glad to see that Timmy Hill and NBM Motorsports are back. We'll see how competitive they can be, and we'll see how they end up doing. But nonetheless, once again, glad to see that NBM Motorsports is returning at Circuit of the Americas. Wishing them the best of luck. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Danny Cavilla. As it was announced on Wednesday late afternoon that Danny Cavilla will be driving the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing next weekend at Circuit Americas. For those who do not know who Danny Cavilla is a former Formula One driver who was part of Red Bull's Academy for many years, and at one time was also a reserve driver for Ferrari. Now, Danny Cavilla has been competing, I think, in GT racing over the course of the last couple of seasons, and he's also made a few select starts in the past. In 2022, he drove 3 races for Team Haysburgs with a best finish of 33rd. And he also competed in a one-off with Sam Hunt Racing in 2022, at the Charlotte Roval, and finished a respectable 15th place. Now, unfortunately for Danny Cavilla, he drove for Sam Hunt Racing in that race of the Roval. Unfortunately, he's driving for SS Greenlight Racing. Now, will they maybe get some support from Chevy or the manufacturer driving for? It certainly is possible, considering Danny Cavilla is bringing his own sponsorship and funding. But the worry I have with Danny Cavilla getting behind the wheel is the fact that Danny Cavilla is going to be in a car that's been a little bit slow on the racetrack to start the season. But they are in a decent position in the owner's points. Patrick Emerling has got some solid runs, but they are going to be in a position where they have to qualify their way in on time. They have struggled to do that this season, and we'll see if he can do it. But this is also going to be the first time that Patrick Emerling is not behind the wheel of the 07 car this year. It sounds like he's got a commitment to the modified series probably. That's why he's getting behind the wheel. But I'm excited to see Danny Cavilla get back behind the wheel. I really hope he can make the field because it'd be really cool to see him a chance and opportunity to get a chance to make the Xfinity Series race at Circuit Americas because I think he would be very solid and really competitive with the team and the organization as a whole. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, yesterday, Kyle Busch was on the Pat McAfee show, and they talked about a lot of different things. They talk about Kyle Busch's fight that he had with Joey Logano, and they also talk about the differences between Formula One and NASCAR. Kyle Busch also, and we saw Pat McAfee call Max Verstappen Max Vanderstappen, which I thought was really, really funny and really, really good to see, because I think it's funny to watch and make fun of that. And also Kyle Busch is calling out Formula One and the racing product as well. Look, having people like Kyle Busch on the Pat McAfee show is really, really huge. We've been seeing more NASCAR drivers get on these shows. Now, why have we been seeing more NASCAR drivers get out there and promote themselves? Well, a big reason. NASCAR is trying to get that younger demographic, and Pat McAfee, generally his audience is kind of in that average demographic that NASCAR is looking for, which is that 18 to 49 demographic. And we've obviously seen the sport grow in the last couple of years, and really especially this year. Every single race so far in the Cup Series has had over 4 million viewers. And outside of the Daytona 500, which unfortunately ended up raining out, every single race has gone up percentage-wise. I think Atlanta went up 5 or 6%. Vegas went up, I think, 11% or something like that. And then this past weekend at Phoenix was up nearly 20% from last year's event. Having people like Kyle Busch go on these bigger shows, because Kyle Busch is one of the bigger personalities. We've seen Bubba Wallace get on some pretty big shows recently, and we've even seen guys like Kyle Larson are looking to go on some shows. Same with Ryan Blaney, who was on the Kelly Clarkson show. We are seeing more of these drivers go on these bigger shows, and I think it's going to grow the sport if they continue promoting the sport as a whole. But nonetheless, glad to see that Kyle Busch was able to get on the Pat McAfee show. I really hope that he can go on more shows and more drivers, especially owners, can get on these shows going forward in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, over the course of the last couple weeks, there's been a lot of big announcements surrounding Junior Motorsports. About a week or two ago, it was announced that Bubba Pollard was going to be making his Xfinity Series debut in a couple weeks at Richmond Raceway. And it was announced earlier this week that Connor Zillich will be running 4 select Xfinity Series starts with Junior Motorsports. He's going to run at Watkins Glen, then I think Kansas, then I think Phoenix, and there's another race I can't remember that he is going to be running. But now Junior Motorsports is teasing another announcement that they're working on, and according to what Dale Jr. says, it sounds like Sundrop is going to be involved with this announcement. Now, Dale Jr. has had a pretty big partnership with Sundrop over the course of the last couple of years, and they, of course, sponsored his late model when he ran at North Wilkesboro last year, and also, I think, in the 2022 race that they ran at North Wilkesboro as well. Now, what does this mean for Dale Jr.? Well, it probably could be a teaser of Dale Jr. himself announcing that he is going to be returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Because Dale Jr. at this point, and he usually announces it early in the season what races he is going to run. Obviously, now he has a little more openness because he's not working with NBC and he's taking the year off. He can probably choose what races that he wants to run. And I'm guessing that Dale Jr. is trying to basically going to have Sundrop as a sponsor for the events that he is going to run. Now, what tracks could Dale Jr. run? Maybe he gets an opportunity to run a track like Richmond again. He's been good at that racetrack historically. Maybe he runs somewhere else like Bristol again, where he was probably the best car in the field for the second half of that race before, unfortunately, his car caught on fire. Damn, he had a shot at winning in that event. But still, Dale Jr.'s teasing. Now, what could Junior Motorsports also do if it's not just Dale Jr.? Well, maybe they're going to get someone else to come behind the wheel, like a Kyle Busch perhaps, Kyle Larson, a Kevin Harvick. Maybe even Matt DiBenedetto or Carl Edwards could be a potential possibility. Who knows at this point, even Raja Karuk. But still, it's really cool to see a Junior Motorsports' teasing announcement when Sundrop. I think it's really huge for the sport if they can get involved in some way, in some sort of capacity. We'll see what it is with Sundrop, and we'll see if an announcement happens relatively soon. Dale Jr.'s teasing that it is going to be coming relatively soon. It's cool to see, though, they're looking at having a pretty big announcement in regards to Sundrop in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about John Hunter Nemechek and Joey Logano. Now, during the North Wilkesboro test, which we're going to get into here in just a second, Joey Logano was asked, have John Hunter Nemechek and Joey Logano have had conversations about what happened at Phoenix Raceway. If you watch the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix International Raceway, about 100 laps to go in the event, Joey Logano was not really having a great day and was struggling out on the racetrack, and he kind of talked about during his press conference as well after the tire test. Well, John Hunter Nemechek just went and straight up plowed right into the back of Joey Logano. And Joey Logano, rightfully so, was not very happy with John Hunter Nemechek for the crash in the incident, even though Joey Logano had been struggling throughout the day. But John Hunter literally said this after the race, because Logano said he was not really happy. He said John Hunter Nemechek needs to man up. And John Hunter spoke to the media after the race, including Matt Weaver from Sports Dot, and basically said that, yeah, he's sorry, he made a mistake, and he screwed up, and he says he planned to reach out to Joey Logano. Now we're hearing that both of them have reached out to each other, and it sounds like things are on good terms. Look, Joey Logano's already had a couple issues with Toyota drivers up to this point this season. And Joey Logano has struggled on the racetrack this year. And I think for Joey Logano's sake, it is a good move to basically try to go out there and now focus on getting a really good finishes. Joey Logano currently at the moment is sitting outside the top 30 in points and right now only has one top 10 finish, and that was a 9th place at Las Vegas. His other 3 finishes, if I'm not mistaken, have been outside the top 30, and he hasn't scored really any stage points at all. Maybe outside of Vegas, he has really failed to score stage points up to this point, even though he probably did have the fastest car in the first 2 races of the season. It is a shame that there's been some struggles for Joey Logano, but I'm glad to see that at least John Hunter and Joey Logano have come to the table table and talk to each other and have come on terms, and it sounds like things at least are looking up between both of the drivers, and hopefully they can move on from the situation and focusing on putting on really good performances, because like I said, they have both struggled up to this point so far this season. Hopefully they both can turn the corner and turn the season around going into the rest of 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the North Wilkesboro tire test. Now, over the course of the last couple of days, there's been a tire test that's been going on the new repaved North Wilkesboro Speedway. We talked about a little bit on the channel yesterday or a couple of days ago on Wednesday, talk about the truck series running the tire test, and they were running some really impressive laps during the tire test. According to what I think Caden Honeycutt said, it was 18.27 seconds. Now, Joey Logano and the rest of the Cup Series drivers on Wednesday and Thursday were talking about the tire test, and they were saying that the track was changing throughout the test. Even with the new repaved surface, the track was changing, and the track was even aging a little bit, even with very few laps on the racetrack. Remember, it was basically confirmed, and they basically had already done this. They repaved the track. Why? Well, the track had not been resurfaced since 1981. Now, historically, when it comes to repaves and resurfacing racetracks, generally the racing product tends to not be as good. But if the track is changing and there's bumps on the racetrack, I think that could create a really solid racing product. I think it's going to make the Truck Series have a really good show. I think the last Truck Series race at North Wilkesboro, which we had last year, by the way, I thought the race itself was really solid and really, really good and had a pretty great racing product. But I think the Cup Series, on the other hand, did not have as good of a racing product, but I'm going to put more of the blame on the next-gen car than anything else in regards to that. But as for the North Wilkesboro, I'm excited for the event later this year. I'm not sure how the Cup Series race is going to go, considering we know the next-gen car hasn't had as good of a racing product on the short tracks in the last couple of years. In the last time he ran there, Larson put an ass-whooping on the field. In fact, he swept the weekend. He beat drivers like Bubba Wallace in the NASCAR Xfinity Truck Series race, and then, of course, dominated the NASCAR Cup Series race, but Bubba Wallace did finish second, which was really, really impressive, by the way, and Bubba had a really great performance at that track. But as for the track, I'm excited to see the Truck Series race for sure. And I do think the Cup Series race has a really great chance and a really strong possibility of being very solid and really, really good. So we'll see what happens in regards to how North Wilkesboro ends up going, and we'll see how the race ends up going later this season and later this year. We'll see what happens, and we'll see how the performance goes. But glad to see that North Wilkesboro was, in fact, tire tested, and we'll see if it can be very successful in 2024, this year down the road. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Josh Williams. As it was announced on Wednesday early morning that Josh Williams is going to drive the 16 car for Kaulig Racing in a couple weekends at Martinsville Speedway. Josh Williams, of course, who currently is driving full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for Kaulig Racing, driving the 11 car, has not had a really great start to the 2024 season. Josh Williams so far has been very underwhelming. He's only had one top 15 finish, but granted, the other three races, he's been caught up in incidents that sadly have really not been his fault, and really has not been in fault for the incidents that he has been in up to this point. He's also made a couple NASCAR Cup Series starts. He did run Atlanta Motor Speedway, I believe, where he kind of struggled a little bit, though I think he did get maybe a top 30 finish. Actually, he crashed out early in the event and then run the Clash, but unfortunately did not make the show. Now, Josh Williams is a really, really good short track racer, but it is no secret that Kaulig Racing has been struggling just a little bit on short tracks, and they haven't been as good on the racetrack in the Cup Series so far this year. And then you kind of worry about Kaulig Racing just a little bit going into the future. Why do I worry about Kaulig Racing? Well, look at their performance. They've had to get a lot of drivers that had a lot of money, because last year they had AJ Allmendinger and Justin Haley getting behind the wheel of those seats. Like I said, you had drivers like last year, Allmendinger and Justin Haley in there full time. But they lost Justin Haley when he went to Rick Ware Racing, and then they lost AJ Allmendinger being full-time because he didn't bring the sponsorship and funding. They were looking at getting a driver like Matt DiBenedetto for this season. He was planning to run quite a few races, and I think some of the races that Derek Kraus had and Shane Van Gisbergen has later this year, which Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be making his season debut next weekend at Circuit of the Americas, by the way. They were supposed to basically have those guys guys in there, but unfortunately Matt DiBenedetto lost the funding and lost the ride because he didn't bring the sponsorship and funding. And that's why you're seeing him trying to scramble to figure out what they're going to do, especially when it comes to who's going to get behind the wheel of the seat the rest of this year. We know Shane Van Gisbergen is going to have 8 NASCAR Cup Series races in this car. We know Derek Cross has a few more races scheduled, same with AJ Allmendinger. In a nutshell, there are some drivers that are going to get behind the wheel of this seat throughout the rest of 2024. But again, they could have had a driver like Matt DiBenedetto who could have driven in this seat this year. Maybe they get someone out of retirement, out of nowhere, who knows at this point. But at the same time, I really don't know what they're going to do for the rest of the season. I am happy that we're going to see Josh Williams get the chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel. I just feel like they could have gotten someone else this year to get behind the wheel, and I feel like they made a little bit of bad decision and bad moves here. But I hope Josh Williams can run really well and can turn the season around in Xfinity especially. I am worried about him because he struggled so far this year, and he's kind of a little bit in the danger zone when it comes to the owner's points currently at this moment. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zillich. Now, earlier in the week, it was announced that Connor Zillich will be joining Junior Motorsports on a part-time basis in 2024. But this morning, it was announced that Connor Zillich has more races on his schedule for the 2024 season. He is going to be joining Spire Motorsports on a part-time basis in 2024, driving the number 7 truck. He's going to make his debut next weekend at Circuit of the Americas. Then he's going to run at Talladega in the fall, and then he's going to run at Homestead Miami Speedway. For those who do not know who Connor Zillich is, Connor is one of the most talented race car drivers coming up. He is one of the highly talented prospects. Last year, he had some very, very impressive runs. He won a Cars Late Model Tour race at Ace Speedway, I believe. He also has won a lot of Mazda MX-5 Cup races. I think he's almost won a championship in that series as well. And on top of that, when you look at Connor Zillich, he won a class in the Rolex 24 earlier this year at the age of 17 years old, becoming the second youngest winner in a class in the history of the Rolex 24, and was the 5th fastest driver in the LMP2 class, and also last year made his ARCA debut for Pinnacle Racing Group and was leading with a broken track bar, sway bar on the car to only get passed on the last lap by Jesse Love after Jesse Love just almost nearly dumped him in the event. Connor Zillich, in my opinion, is one of the best up-and-coming talents currently in the NASCAR world today. And I am certainly excited to see that he's getting more starts in the Truck Series as well. Remember, he has a multi-year deal and he has a contract development deal with Trackhouse Racing. He's part of 5 drivers are currently part of the Trackhouse Racing family. Ross Chastain in the 1 car, Daniel Suarez in the 99, obviously, who's like kind of on a contract year, though we may see Daniel Suarez back behind the wheel. Shane Van Gisbergen is working on development deals, but on his way up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series and is also making select Cup starts as well. And Zane Smith, who's on loan to Spire Motorsports, but currently under contract with Trackhouse as well. And now got Connor Zillich, who's making starts in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series as well. Now, what are my expectations for Connor Zillich in the Truck Series? Well, I honestly think Connor Zillich could win. I know it's crazy to say for a 17-year-old driver, but if there's anybody that can step up to the plate, especially at a road course, the type of track where Connor Zillich has raced go-karts and won championships overseas and everything he's accomplished on road racing, I think he could win the truck race at Spire Race at Coda. We know how strong Spire Motorsports program has been to start this year. They've technically won every single race. Nick Sanchez technically is under contract a little bit with Spire as well, though he is with Rev Racing. He's got an alliance deal with Spire. I think Connor Zillich is going to be a championship contender, and not championship contender, he's only running a few races, but I think he is going to be a contender for sure next weekend at Circuit Americas. He might not be my pick just yet to win the truck race, but to see him getting the chance and opportunity to work with Spire Motorsports this season, I think is phenomenal and absolutely incredible. There's a lot of talent surrounding this kid, and I'm excited to see what he could do. I think he's going to do a phenomenal and outstanding job with Spire Motorsports in the next weekend at Circuit Americas, and just see him getting more chance opportunities later this year is phenomenal. I think it's only a matter of time before Connor Zillich is making Cup Series starts. Granted, he doesn't turn 18 until July, but I think in the next couple years, by 2026 or even 2027, he's probably going to be making NASCAR Cup Series starts in the Trackhouse Racing family. So nonetheless, really excited about this and glad to see that Connor Zillich is getting chance and opportunities to work with Spire Motorsports this season in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, we have had a lot of conversations surrounding the conversation of increasing horsepower. And a lot of the conversation started earlier in the week when Denny Hamlin spoke on the engine builds that he had with 2311 Racing. He says that the engine builds are the same with 670 horsepower as they are with 900 horsepower. They have not changed because remember, they're running a 900 to 1000 horsepower engine right now broke down to 670. And according to what according to what Denny Hamlin said, they're running the same amount of horsepower there. Now, Kyle Larson was on at the Dale Jr. Dallin earlier this week, and this got a lot of talking. He called out NASCAR because of the lack of horsepower and says that they could run 1,000 horsepower next week. They could have run 1,000 horsepower this week at Bristol. According to Scott Maxis, who works Hendrick Motorsports, who does a lot of the R&D stuff over there, basically the performance stuff at Hendrick Motorsports, he told Kyle that they could do it the next week. In fact, Kyle even revealed that they're actually making the engine 1,000 horsepower to put in one of Rick Hendrick's cars. One of his performance cars, not a car you see on the Cup Series track. No, in one of Rick Hendrick's personal cars, they're putting 1,000 horsepower in. Now, we'll get back to Kyle Larson's comments in just a second, but Kevin Harvick also spoke on this situation as well, and he says that he wants to also see the horsepower increase on these next-gen cars as well. He wants to see the tires basically blown out of the back of them because more tire work could come into play if you have increased horsepower. And also, we saw a couple people kind of like dissenting. I thought Matt Swiderski had a really interesting comment saying, I do love to see it increase, but also there'll be performance gaps. And then Chris Rice was the one that had kind of the dissenting comments, which he basically said that that if you increase the horsepower, you're not going to have as close of fields, and the fields are going to be spread out. Which, by the way, I do agree that it will be more spread out, but I don't think there's any issue with that if the fields become more spread out. At this point, we are hearing Kyle Larson say these comments. We are hearing more and more drivers come out saying that we need to increase the horsepower on these next-gen cars. I'm not saying that you have to increase the horsepower for the intermediate tracks. You don't really have to do that, right? Because I think the racing intermediates right now, though it'd be cool to see maybe increase a little bit, you really don't have to increase on the intermediate tracks because I think the racing on the intermediates is really good right now. And yes, you might get more spread out if you were to increase it on the intermediate tracks. But I don't think they need to for the intermediates. I'm talking about the short tracks. The short tracks absolutely need more horsepower. And the fact that NASCAR, for whatever reason, they'll test all these aero deficiencies. They'll test all these aero things. They'll add new things to the schedule. They'll be open about that kind of stuff. The fact that NASCAR, for some weird reason, keeps going to the manufacturer talk, because yes, we know Honda's interested in coming into NASCAR currently at the moment, but the fact that NASCAR will not budge on increasing horsepower blows my mind. I think it's because they're afraid that there's going to be more spread out fields at the short tracks, which, by the way, they're probably not going to be spread out for a short track. Because, especially for short track, we're running it on the short tracks, mind you, and even the road courses. And it might get spread out on road courses, but the faster cars will be able to pass a little bit easier than the slower cars. Because the problem is that dirty air is so prevalent. If you had more horsepower on the car, which, by the way, I don't think 1,000% will fix the issue, because I think there's other issues on this car than just the horsepower, I still think you would have a better chance of getting a better racing product. And one thing that frustrates me is that we all know these teams and these drivers are begging for them to increase it. Denny Hamlin is. We've seen many drivers, like Chase Elliott has seen in the past talk about. I think even Kyle Busch talked about the lack of horsepower as well back in the day. People want to see the horsepower increase on this car. So at this point, why not test it? Why not at least give it a try and test it? We were supposed to get rid of shifting at the Phoenix test in December, and we didn't even test getting rid of the shifting. Why not spend a couple days? We could have done it at the North Wilkesboro test, mind you, that we just had this week. But for whatever reason, NASCAR did not budge on that, and it doesn't make any sense. I understand that NASCAR says it's going to cost a lot of money. But by the way, everyone that's been talking about it has said it's not going to cost anything. At this point, what is stopping NASCAR from at least trying to test it? That's what I want to see, so that we can basically get our confirmation right that it's better, or if it's not fixing anything and we have other fraudulent issues with this car outside of the horsepower. I want to see them test it, because I do feel like the racing will actually be a little bit better if they go ahead and test it. I feel like that we need to try it out at least. I'm so sick and tired of NASCAR just saying, oh, we'll do it if a new manufacturer comes in. But why would Honda hold off because of horsepower? I think it's the growth of the sport. Jeff brought up a really good point in his video earlier this week, saying that Honda's probably coming in because the sport is growing. They're not coming in because of horsepower. They're coming in because the sport is growing. NASCAR's been on an increase in the last year or so, and this year, like I mentioned earlier, we've had 4 straight races with 4 million plus viewers. So at this point, there should be no more excuses anymore. Let's try out increased horsepower and see if the racing product is better. And Kyle Larson is absolutely 100% on the money with that. I agree. We need to try out more horsepower to see if the racing is going to be any better than we have currently at this moment. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kamui Kobayashi. As it was announced earlier today, or on Wednesday, that Kamui Kobayashi is going to be joining 23XI Racing once again at Circuit of the Americas, driving the number 50 car. Now, interestingly, they're running the number 50 car from Kamui Kobayashi, which the Money team has ran over the course of the last couple of years. The reason they're running the number 50 car is because it, of course, is the 50th year anniversary of Mobil 1, so we know Mobil 1 is getting behind the wheel. Now, for those who do not know who Kamui Kobayashi is, we'll now talk about him. Kamui Kobayashi is a legend of the World Endurance Championship scene. He's won the Le Mans 24 Hours. He's also, I believe, won the Rolex 24 in the past as well, and is also a former Formula 1 driver. Actually got a podium in Formula 1, I think, back in like 2012 or 2013, if I'm not mistaken, and is still competing with Toyota currently at the moment, and is one of Toyota's higher-up drivers in the World Endurance Championship. His name had been mentioned. It makes a lot of sense because there's been a couple off weeks that they've had, so we were wondering who they were going to be because we knew 23XI Racing was planning and teasing that they were going to run a third car at some point this year. Names have been mentioned. I saw Carl Edwards' name mentioned. I saw Kurt Busch's name even mentioned. We were talking about Kurt Busch about a week ago that Kurt had been teasing a possible return, which I don't know if that's going to happen at this point. We even saw drivers like Chandler Smith and Eric Almirola even brought up in the conversation. But now we've got Kamui Kobayashi getting behind the wheel of the seat. Kamui did compete last year at the Indianapolis Road Course in the number 67 car, and unfortunately had a pretty bad run, finishing 33rd, but I'm going to blame that more on the lack of respect on the racetrack taking him out more than anything else. I expect Kamui Kobayashi to actually be a lot better this time around in this car than he was the last time. Now, what are my early predictions for his run? I think Kamui Kobayashi will probably get, and it's just my early prediction, I think he's going to finish inside the top 20 potentially. I think he's going to be a lot better this time around, and now having that experience behind the wheel of this seat, the one race prior, and having a lot more practice time, because remember, for this weekend at Circuit Americas, they're getting an extra 20 minutes of practice time. I expect that Kamui is going to run a lot better this time around. I know that Coda has been chaotic in the past. I believe that we're going to see Kamui Kobayashi do a much better job behind the wheel of the seat. But now we start speculating a little bit about 23XI Racing because we talk about the future of this team. We know that 23XI Racing's been teasing that they're wanting to run a third car full-time in the future. They're obviously built their new shop called Airspeed that's basically getting close to being finished. We know they want to eventually be a 4-car organization. There's a lot of drivers that drive for the team that have driven for them in the past or looking to run at times. We know there's been some rumors of them wanting to expand. You think about Kurt Busch. He's been rumored recently, though I don't know if he's ever going to return. You think about some of the upcoming Toyota development drivers like Corey Hyde, who's going to be with 23XI Racing this year. We know that there's probably going to be other drivers who are working with the team in the not-so-distant future. So I think 23XI Racing is looking to expand not too far down the road. But you think about the other major talking point, and it's basically the fact that you've got, possibility of more teams coming in. We know there's expected to be 3 open cars for the race this year. Let's talk about those open cars just for a second. We know that NBM Motorsports is showing up with Timmy Hill, and we now know that Kamui Kobayashi is going to be in the Cup Series race as well. Who else could join? Well, we know Trackhouse could expand to a third or fourth car, but Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be running with Call, so that's probably not going to be an option. We could see Call Racing run an extra car for AJ Allmendinger. That certainly is possible because AJ's been really good at road courses, so maybe that could be a possibility. What about a team, I don't know, like Front Row Motorsports? Maybe they run a third car for a driver like a Haley Deegan perhaps or something like that. What about, think about RFK, that 60 car. I know people mentioned Cam Waters, but I believe he's got commitments currently with supercars, so I don't know if that's going to be possible. I think the most likely is that number 33 car for RCR, though, because I know Brett Griffin has been teasing that they're planning to run some select races in 2024 with him being the spotter, and I don't think it's going to be Brody Kosecki. I would imagine it could be someone else in Chevy's development group, like a Jesse Love perhaps, maybe Austin Hill gets a chance on a road course. I think that would be very interesting if they were to do that, or bringing someone else in out of nowhere that wouldn't expect, that's been part of their programs in the past. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see, but I am glad to see that Kamui Kobayashi is back in NASCAR. I don't think he got a really fair shake the last time he ran, and having that international flair come back to NASCAR, I think is really huge for the sport, because I do expect Kamui Kobayashi is going to be very, very solid driving for 23XI Racing, and he's been a major help, and I think he's going to be a major help for Bubba Wallace, who in my opinion has gotten way better on road courses in the last couple of years, and I think he's going to help Tyler Reddick as well, even though I don't think Tyler Reddick needs as much help, considering the fact that Tyler Reddick is the defending winner at this track of Circuit of the Americas. I think that COTA is going to be extremely exciting. I think there's a lot of big names running some of these events coming up in the next couple of weeks. And in general, in a nutshell, I'm excited to see what drivers will get behind the wheel of this seat in 2024 at this tracks. But I'm glad to see that Kamui Kobayashi is back in the Cup Series. We'll see how he ends up doing in 2024 COTA. He doesn't have to worry about making the show. I think he's going to have a chance of getting a top 20 with this team and this organization. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links are below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How do you expect Kamui Kobayashi to do? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And do you agree with Kyle Larson that we should increase the horsepower? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, I have a Shane Van Gisbergen video dropping on the channel talking about if he'll be full-time in Cup in 2025. And then I'll also have the reaction to who wins the pole for the Cup race at Bristol. And I'll have the Truck Series race view from Bristol as well. Then on Sunday, I'm going to have the starting lineup video for the Cup race at Bristol. And I'm also going to have the Cup Series race review. And then on Monday, we're going to have basically a news video dropping. And then on Tuesday, we're going to have entry list videos for the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series as well. Maybe even the Truck Series as well. I might have 3 videos that day. In general, got a lot of great content dropping for COTA that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.